22 Emmy wins, half a decade since the final episode aired. Yet, this discontinued network sitcom is completely dominating global streaming charts right now. It is beating out massive modern hits. The question is, why?
Welcome back to Learning with Pratik. If you're new here, I try to increase neuroplasticity by exploring a new topic every day. I do all the reading and researching, so you don't have to. Today, our explainer dives into the enduring streaming dominance of Modern Family, deconstructing its absolute grip on the culture. We'll be logically deconstructing this phenomenon today. First, the streaming numbers. Second, how they design the show. Third, the mockumentary format. Fourth, an analysis of roles and representation. And finally, its legacy as the ultimate comfort comedy. Let's kick things off with Phase 1, the streaming phenomenon. Just look at the sheer scale of this show's afterlife. After an incredible 11-season run that wrapped up in 2020, you'd normally expect a standard network sitcom to just sort of fade into television history, eclipsed by high-budget streaming originals. But the data shows something fascinating. Half a decade later, it sits as the 6th most watched program in the world on Disney+. Think about the sheer volume of that metric. It is consistently outpacing massive, current, global juggernauts, including omnipresent hits like Bluey. And simultaneously, it's holding huge, dedicated audiences in the US across platforms like Hulu and Peacock. In our modern attention economy, where viewers are notoriously fickle, this audience didn't leave. They actively sought the show out and shifted platforms, proving a really rare kind of cultural stickiness.
Which brings us to Phase 2, designing Modern Family. To understand the staying power, we have to look at the architects, creators Christopher Lloyd and Steve Levitan. They didn't start with some high-concept gimmick. They literally just pulled from their own family trials, the idiotic, highly relatable, and painfully awkward things happening in their own homes. Now, context is key here. The early 2000s comedy landscape was highly cynical. Shows were snappy, sarcastic, leaning heavily into cringe. But the creators felt the genre lacked substance. They deliberately went against the grain by injecting genuine emotion, what Lloyd called protein, back into the sitcom format. They were totally willing to risk being labeled overly sentimental by critics, just so they could give the audience moments of real, grounded drama right in the middle of the rapid-fire laughs. Their development timeline brilliantly illustrates this deliberate approach. Rather than rushing a flashy pilot to impress network executives, they spent 6 full weeks just building out the psychology of these characters, establishing the inherent conflicts for the patriarch, Jay, his much younger new wife, Gloria, and his deeply flawed adult children. They did all of this before a single plot line was ever written. Why does this matter? Because taking 6 weeks to figure out how these people tick roots the comedy in psychological reality, not just superficial situational gags. When a character reacts bizarrely later on, you implicitly understand it. It feels completely earned and entirely true to their nature. But here's the wild part. Despite this careful planning, the project almost looked entirely different. Behind the scenes, the friction with the network was intense. Executives actually rejected Ty Burrell initially for the now iconic role of Phil Dunphy. They just weren't convinced he could anchor the humor. It took a raw test scene, shot in Levitan's own home, to finally change their minds. On top of that, casting the child actors proved nearly impossible. They wanted kids who possessed a raw, slightly awkward quality, a stark contrast to the polished Hollywood smiles you usually saw on TV. The pushback was so incredibly strong that the creators seriously considered abandoning live action altogether and making the show an animated cartoon, just to protect their creative vision. Moving on to Phase 3, the mockumentary magic. To ground these carefully crafted characters, they borrowed from an emerging trend, the mockumentary format. Pulling from the booming reality TV era, this agile documentary-style approach completely changed how they produced the show. Instead of traditional multi-cam setups with live audiences and laugh tracks, they could shoot much faster. They used handheld cameras, capturing multiple actors simultaneously from different angles. Jokes didn't get stale over dozens of takes, allowing them to capture genuinely spontaneous actor reactions. And the camera itself essentially became a character. A sudden quick zoom wasn't just capturing a moment. The zoom operated as the punchline itself, creating an illusion of chaotic authenticity that traditional sitcoms just didn't have. This format also delves deep into the psychological effect of breaking the fourth wall. By looking directly at the lens, the characters bypass traditional boundaries and invite us right into their living room. Whether it's a silent glance of sheer exasperation or a highly vulnerable confessional interview, you instantly feel like a participant. You are no longer just a passive observer watching actors on a stage. The show cultivates a strong parasocial bond. It feels like you're eavesdropping on a real, somewhat dysfunctional family, which makes the emotional beats hit significantly harder.
Next up, Phase 4. Analyzing roles and representation. When a show penetrates the culture this deeply, media scholars inevitably begin analyzing how it reflects our societal norms. A major focus of this academic framing is the same-sex couple, Mitchell and Cameron, and scholars note a fascinating irony in their dynamic. Academic literature analyzes how presenting a gay couple raising a child on mainstream network television was a highly progressive milestone, but the show made it palatable to middle America by leaning on deeply traditional archetypes. Mitch is categorized by patriarchal traits. He's highly critical, professional, and avoids confrontation. Cam, conversely, is categorized by matriarchal traits, his emotional sensitivity, his flamboyance, and his deep desire to be the caregiver. This careful balancing act naturally sparks intense, impartial cultural debate. Media critics dissect what this says about modern masculinity, debating whether modern TV is removing men from authentic spheres of action or just redefining those spheres entirely. On the flip side, everyday fans weren't tuning in for an academic sociology lesson. They simply saw a loving, incredibly funny family that they deeply related to. The show essentially acts as a mirror. It perfectly reflects these complex discussions about traditional dynamics versus progressive representation without ever preaching to its audience. By navigating this tension, it managed to satisfy cultural critics looking for a landscape shift while still giving millions of viewers a bona fide, relatable family dynamic.
Finally, Phase 5, the comfort comedy legacy. The true secret sauce of this show is this exact perfect synthesis. In an era dominated by high-stress, dark prestige television that constantly keeps audiences on edge, Modern Family provides an antidote. It takes absurd mockumentary reality and pairs it with undeniable heart, backed by weeks of foundational character psychology. It proves that families can be wildly different, constantly bickering, deeply flawed, and still entirely beautiful. It doesn't rely just on the joke. It relies on the quiet moments of connection that happen right between the laughs. That cross-generational relatability, combined with an unyielding focus on genuine human connection, is exactly why millions relentlessly stream it, years after the final director called cut.
Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, especially if you have something particular in mind. Thanks for watching. Tomorrow, we open a different page. Until then, Pratik, out.